To call to order this meeting of the Victor Area Regional Wastewater Agency at 5 o'clock. And please join me in honoring our flag. I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Motion. Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Herrick,
Aye.
Vice Chair Walsh,
Aye.
and Chair Segovia.
Aye. All right, moving on to public forum. Public testimony is permitted at this time on the following sections of the agenda: presentation and introduction, information committee reports, consent calendar, and any other matters within the agency's subject matter jurisdiction that are not included on the posted agenda. Do we have any public comment?
Tom?
I don't pay attention to that 3 minutes, you know. So anyway, first of all, it says replenish Big Bear preliminary design report. What have you guys been doing for the last 9 years? All of a sudden now you have another preliminary design report? What happened to all the money that you already spent? What happened to the $10 million or so, or whatever, $9 million that you spent? What happened? So now you're gonna start all over from the scratch? Okay, well, it sure sounds like it here. Anyway, please definitely read this, okay? Because I'm dead serious about this. And then the other thing is I'm cutting half of this out because I know this is gonna be something else. Yeah, anyway, no, but this is really important for what's happening right here. The board should have a format, a formal vote today if you can, okay? For now on, I'm saying prior, that is prior to the starting of any project of this magnitude, it must be put on a ballot vote. You had 9 years to do it already, and you still have another 9 years apparently. Okay, we the people that pay should get a say so. Why does the board have 5 people in the whole world tell us and decide what 26,000 residents are going to need and are going to vote for it? They're gonna vote for these fraudulent boondoggle projects again and again. I'm sure that you know about the pharmaceutical drugs that are in our water. And you don't even need to know anymore about that. Apparently you know everything. Common sense tells me pumping pharmaceuticals into our aquifer is not that good, okay? We know we have a for-profit government and city council that have been slowly killing the middle class. It's proven. The average expectancy of a male, this is 70 years now. My grandparents lived 100. And 75 years for females. That's pretty sad. Our water aquifer has been supplying water to this valley for thousands of years. The water in our lake evaporates 2 to 4 inches for every day, pretty much it is. Decades, our natural springs have been supplying that extra water, the 2 to 4 inches. We do not need another 2 to 4 inches of this water, or do we need to spend another $2 million on this project? I know you're saying it's only 54 million, but that's bullshit, you know it. This project should have been put up on the ballot and let the people that are paying decide and know all the ramifications involved. You have had 10 years, 9 to 10 years now, and spent $10 million for that. Please correct me if I'm wrong, apparently that might be. $10 million for consulting fees, I imagine. I wonder who's getting all those consulting fees. I couldn't imagine. Not at all. Where'd the money go? We know that PBK got their share. 5 board members have made good living with no skin in the game. This is a free country, and I am an American. And here, did you see this? There's nothing about this about the 3-minute rule. That's a suggestion. That is a corporate law. That is not my law. That's your law.
Thank you.
Period. Let me see. Oh, no, I'm not finished. Did you know that we still have potable water wells in our valley and fresh drinking water today? That we will be destroying if we pump toxic waste into it. You know that. Why ruin that for everybody? Anyway, you just heard it, you 3 million fool. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment?
People.
Good evening, board. My name is Andrew Replenish. I'm a resident of Big Bear City. Two points I want to bring up tonight. One is I hear a lot of talk about what Big Bear City gets for what we're paying into this program. You know, when they built the dam, there was a lot of things they didn't know. They didn't know where the water was gonna go. They didn't know who was gonna benefit from it. But I think pretty much the whole entire valley has benefited from the lake and the dam in one way or another. What I would like to propose is an idea of, so that we can maybe agree in the middle, is the idea of having a credit. So if we give 100% of the water created by Replenish Big Bear to the city of Big Bear Lake, let's say that's 1 million gallons every day, right? So what if we got a credit as Big Bear City of 500,000 gallons? That we could some days in the future, depending on what our needs are 10 years from now or 20 years from now, maybe Baldwin Lake, maybe some other kind of ski mountain that we might have on this end. If we had a credit, I'd feel better if we're paying money into something, that we did get something, even the promise of something. That seems to make sense to me. In a growing community. As a real estate agent, I know that a lot of times you might live in a community where you have residents that say, one day this was an orange grove. And then today, there's no orange trees, but there's people. There's a bigger need for water in various areas. So just like the dam was built over 100 years ago, and they didn't know where all that water was gonna go and how it was gonna be used, it's the same way today. We have an opportunity that we've been working on for almost a decade or more to keep our water up here. We don't know all the ways that Big Bear City might have a need 10 years from now or 50 years from now. But I have a gut feeling that we all understand that it makes sense to keep all of our water, wastewater that's treated or however we handle it. We do something with it that benefits our community. It's our water. I mean, we use it, and we can reuse it. That's one thing. And the second thing I'd like to mention in closing is, you know, you are our board. And this whole idea that me, somebody who doesn't know anything, I mean, Kendi, you've said a lot. I researched this and I know what's going on with it. That's what we want you to do. I don't want to vote on something like this because I'm hoping, and I know your character, when you say you've read it, you know, and you, I mean, I know that you guys are trustworthy, so I respect your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Marta Neely. So just recently, I was always trying to learn more about what's going on with water. And I've been looking at the NASA maps of desertification from even 6 years ago. Desertification across the planet in different continents. And the entire looks like the entire western half of the United States is desertifying. I talked to a friend up in British Columbia, and they had temperatures like 121 degrees last summer. I know it's hard for me to even say it, it's hard to believe, but things are changing, the planet is changing, desertification is a severe issue. We've had a couple of good years. Last year was not, I did not think last winter was especially good, but the previous winter we had a good year. And we're always crossing our fingers. I feel like I'm always holding my breath that we have another good year. I'm very scared after that last drought. It was like 1 in 1,200 years or something like that, the worst drought ever in recorded history. So this project, my understanding is after 10 years, it would be potentially 4.5 feet higher. Yes, we're always gonna have evaporation, but it would still be 4.5 feet higher than otherwise. And I think that is significant, but I also agree that we'd like to get some benefit to the east end. I think the lake is a benefit to everyone. And the last thing I want to say is that I've talked to numerous people here, and everyone has been extremely helpful, especially Mr. Lawrence. He's given a lot of his time to answering my questions. And I've really felt that this board is extremely responsive, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other public comment before we move on? All right. Moving on to presentation and introduction, audit report for fiscal year and June 30, 2025.
I'm gonna introduce Brad Oliver with Rogers, Anderson, and Scott, our auditor, and he's going to find the them. Here's.
Good evening. It's nice to be with you. My name is Brad Oliver. I'm the audit engagement partner for the audit that we performed for fiscal year ended June 30, 2025. Sure. Is this for mic or is this for recording?
It's a mic.
I'm too tall. I will just keep All right, so I have a brief presentation and we'll show how the results of the audit went. And here we go. All right. So our responsibilities as independent auditors are to provide an opinion over the financial statements, whether they're fairly presented for all material respects. And we have done that, and you'll see when we get into the opinion letter here that I have in the slides that we are providing an unmodified opinion, as noted there at the bottom of the slide. And unmodified means that there's no modifications to the financial statements necessary, so they are being conforming with generally accepted accounting principles. It is the language used for the highest level of assurance that auditors can provide financial statements, saying that there's no material misstatements in the financial statements. So we performed our interim audit procedures in June of 2025. Interim procedures covered quite a few items, as you can see some of the items that we've listed, the more significant ones up on the slide there. This is done before the year has closed, so we don't have all the final numbers of what gonna go into the final financial statements, but we're looking at the 12-month period during the year and testing cycles like billing, cash receipts, investments, treasury, purchasing policy, things like that. And I'm pleased to tell you that there was no findings of any nature that would be required to be reported to the board. So all working as expected. We also do tests against your policies, and there were no deviations. The transactions according to the policies. Then we continue to do the year-end portion of the audit, and that happened in August through October. Now we have the year-end numbers for June 30, and we're looking over those and doing our audit procedures on those. Include looking at evidence like invoices, bank deposits, wire transfers, and any number of transactions that happen all throughout the year, especially looking at the year-end balances and making sure that they're fairly represented in financial statements. And all that work is done by Christine and her team here, but we're just doing an independent verification of that. And again, no findings or any of the information. The one thing that was different this year is a new accounting standard, number 101. It's related to compensated absences. So this is an accounting standard that's applicable to all government entities across the United States. And it is trying to normalize the presentation of those because there's a lot of diversity out there, in the governments of what kind of benefits are provided. Compensated absences are like earned but unpaid vacation, sick time, comp time, all kinds of different things. It didn't have a significant impact for your agency, but you can imagine, say, public safety, there's a lot of different varieties of things that are out there across the country. So the main difference that would affect your agency is very minor, But is, because you've already been required under previous standards to report unpaid, earned and unpaid vacation, is now we include the payroll taxes that are associated with those unpaid. So very minor difference. And that has been implemented and included in the financial statements. I mentioned already on the first slide, we received an unmodified report, so that's exactly what want to receive is the same opinion that you received last year and shows that this financial statements are fairly presented in all materials. We are also issuing this other letter that you have, it's this one that's stable. This is our required communications of writing to you in accordance with the statement of auditing standards on Rule 15. In it, you will see this is boilerplate language, but you'll see that there's no uncorrected statements, no difficulties at all working with the agency. And then I would stress here, it's been a pleasure working with Christina and her team. And audit's not necessarily the most fun thing finance people have to go through. They ask a lot of questions, have to provide a lot of documents, but we can tell a lot about how an agency runs, how rapidly our clients respond to our requests, and how good, like the quality of the information, whether we have to go back and forth, this doesn't agree, it doesn't make sense. We don't have any of that here. The quality of the information in the agency is top notch. We actually had no disagreements at all with management. There's also included in this report, the big round one is our report on internal control in accordance with government auditing standards. It also shows there's no deficiencies reported or matters of non-compliance report. So that is excellent, and hopefully they were received data. That's it. I will answer any questions you may have, and then proceed to go.
Do you have any questions?
Just one. The received letters, I presume all the board members got the letters. And it was basically questions, if we had any thoughts that we wanted to share.
Yes.
Was there anything that stood out? No, so.
No, so we do this solicitation, for those that might be wondering what he's talking about. So part of our audit is communicating with, those charged with governance. And we find a good way to do that, is to just put these, letters out to all of you, gives a direct channel from you to us. It can be done in writing, it can be done in person, but because of the nature of people's schedules and so forth, we like to do it in writing. And it gives each of you an opportunity to respond directly to us. We are inquiring about your knowledge of fraud or alleged fraud, related party transactions, looking at various governance information, looking kind of that tone in the top, like what are you aware of? Is there, and then just an open solicitation. Is there anything that you want to communicate to us that we should pay particular attention to? And those items are not things that are going to be reported in format here. It's information directed to us to help us design our audit procedures to address where we see the risks. So all audits are risk-based. We look at all the relevant information during that interim phase, including our review of internal control, and then determine where should we put our focus. There's clearly things that are required to be done in every single audit, but we also have professional judgment on where we want to focus our attention. And we rotate those things to keep Christine on her toes, right? So she doesn't know this, we're asking for the same things every year. But also if we did receive any feedback from you on any particular item, then we would be using that to design our procedures. Maybe if it was a question about some nature of a transaction, we may look more closely at that area.
So that didn't happen.
No, okay. There was no matters of concern that we had that warranted any follow-up with
Thank you.
All right, yes, that's it. I just want to say, I do as a board member, I enjoy reading a well-done report like that, and to see that it's done well and you trust it. So.
Yeah, this report is really, we do a lot of these reports in my firm, and this report, even though we may feel or in some measurements are a small agency, this is as good as any report out there. It's submitted to the GFOA, which is National Organization that receives a letter of, it's up here at the front that shows it meets the standards for excellence in financial reporting. This level of detail and thoroughness is not a requirement, but it's something that the agency has done. It increases transparency, it provides a lot more information than is even required to be. provided to them. That speaks a lot. What?
Much appreciated. So thank you. Great. Let's move on to item 5B, Replenish Big Bear preliminary design report presentation.
Christine, can you get back the?
That Matt, from WFC is here to present that report.
Everyone, start talking quiet if you can't hear me. Matt Rodriguez with WSC, I'm the design manager for Replenish Big Bear. I know you're very used to seeing Lane Carlson next to me, she's the program manager. Unfortunately, she had a death in the family on Monday, so she's been able to make it. Any program related questions come up, I will do my best to answer that. I can't, I will be sure to get back to the board through our staff. So last time I was here was July 2024, presenting the results of the pilot study. This is obviously building upon that in the design phase for Replenish Big Bear. So a preliminary design report conventionally represents the 30% level of design for a facility, which is what we would get to following this presentation. Comments from the board, we would go back and address any comments and complete a 30% design and submit it to party to review. So for our topics today, we're going to go through a little bit of a pilot refresher. It's been a while, so I want to make sure we touch on some key points that we captured last July. We'll look at changes from the pilot. So what changed based on results that we will feed into the pilot design that we're currently in? What's the water quality for the final design and the final treatment process that we have landed on? We'll touch base a little bit on the context of permitting, specifically the NPDES permit, which would allow us to discharge to Big Bear Lake. We'll look at some specifics of the preliminary design, including the process flow diagram, and some key considerations, pipeline alignment for the outgoing pipeline, and then the cost estimate. And I'll hand it off to David Lawrence after that for next steps. For the usual, stop at any point, board members, staff, if you have any questions, if I need to clarify anything, definitely want this to be a conversation with you. So for a pilot refresher, again, we did that last July, and that ran for about 9 to 10 months. John Shipman helped us operate that, and we got a lot of valuable data, a lot of valuable information, which is why we do pilots to help us inform what tweaks we need to make for final design. I want to emphasize up front here, and I'll probably touch on it again. The challenge for this program to successfully meet permit limits cannot be understated. The combined permit limits that we've got against the discharge of Big Bear Lake to protect its beneficial uses. I personally have not found any more stringent limits in the country, especially when you look at nutrients. So I wanted to emphasize that because it's a pretty tall order to come up with a treatment process that meets those objectives. We'll get into that a little bit further as far as where we landed. So the next few slides you will have seen is last July's presentation. So again, just a refresher here of what a pilot study is and isn't. It is a small scale test of potential treatment processes that we would use at full scale. It provides us the opportunity again to collect that valuable water quality data so we can optimize final design. Specifically for Big Bear, we want to estimate brine production, specifically that total system recovery. We're not in a location where we have the convenience of the sanding out of brine line, which takes it out to the ocean. We have to handle that pier. And that necessitates a high product recovery, which is a challenge in itself. And then lastly, we gain valuable operator experience, get hands-on familiarity with different technologies and processes, specifically for the ones we piloted out here. It was not the final Replenish Big Bear treatment process, and it's not an exact report of the water quality we would discharge at Big Bear Lake. So we emphasized that last year when we presented. Again, a pilot helps you optimize and gauge where you need to change going into final design, so you can have that confidence that you will meet your objectives. So the pilot treatment process we had out here included sand filters for nutrient removal. We have 2 membrane steps with ultrafiltration and reverse osmosis, which removes solids, pathogens, those long chain carbon compounds as constituents of concern. And then UVAOP stands for ultraviolet disinfection advanced oxidation process. So it serves as a disinfection step and an extra polishing step for, again, some of those longer chain compounds like these pharmaceuticals. And the like, that produced water would then be sent to Stanfield Marsh as part of the Replenish program. On the bottom there, we have in that dashed box the brine minimization process. You may recall that was piloted off-site. And again, that box right there represents that brine minimization that we need to get that higher flow system recovery. So that dashed line of produced water is basically the extra water recovery getting out of that step. So we can have less evaporation area for our brine. This particular process had some operational issues. It did not provide us the confidence that we would want, even though it did meet our total system recovery goal. And it did have 2 waste streams. So we showed the pellets there that would have to be disposed of or reused, and then the brine that would go alongside the operation plants. We'll refer back to this later. I'm finding process flow diagrams, so we can switch back and forth to compare or drop in if we need to. So key findings from our pilot, there's really 3 main points here. We met all the treatment targets except for total inorganic nitrogen. I'll touch on that. The next slide, I believe, will be showing the numbers. The total inorganic nitrogen, ammonia, nitrate, and nitrite, 3 main nitrogen compounds defined through a wastewater treatment plant. Ammonia was the one that was staying a little bit elevated in what we call bleeding through the process. The sand filters were not as effective as we would have hoped, and we decided that we would not use those for the full scale system. Sand filters use bugs basically will fall into what we call denitrifiers. So that's how convert one nitrogen species to another. Those bugs are limited in colder temperatures, and we just so happened to have some of the coldest wastewater effluent up here during that pilot, which was super helpful because it showed us kind of that extreme of what we'd be bound by. Again, that pilot's helpful for understanding the limitations of our water volume, water chemistry up here. That will provide a lot more chemicals to help tune in and actually remove that nitrogen. So again, we decided that we would not carry that forward in a full scale system. We can instead go to a different virgin treatment process to get our nitrogen down. Then lastly, I touched on this in the last slide, but that brine minimization technology did meet our target of 98%. It did 98.7, but it was unreliable. It had not been proven at a wastewater type application with other industries. So we wanted to carry that forward and look at alternative brine application technologies that could get that same recovery or higher, while also critically meeting your sodium chloride and sulfate limits product recovery. So these are the pilot system results. And so this is again a recap of what we showed last year. The constituents on the left are really representing the key parameters that we're concerned about for Replenish Big Bear's product water, because they are the most stringent water quality objectives within the basic plan, which regulates all the water sources, surface water, groundwater up here. These are all in units of ppm, which is parts per million or milligrams per liter. And then we show that middle column for drinking water objectives just for comparison to our permit objectives, which is really just to illustrate, again, these stringent limits are very low, much lower than drinking water objectives. And as you can see, we're able to meet everything during the pilot except for total inorganic nitrogen. So that was our focus, right? We got out of the pilot, we got very good water quality data that we can take forward into further process modeling and engineering evaluations. And then we got that full system recovery as kind of a lower bound target that we wanted to get above going into final design.
So, quick question, what is inorganic nitrogen?
Basically, you can just think of it as doesn't have carbon, right? So it's, that nitrate, yeah. So most of the nitrogen coming into wastewater plant is ammonia, about 60 to 70% of the total nitrogen. Through the biological processes, the organic nitrogen you do have is converted, to ammonia or ammonia converted to nitrate. And then we have to put that in an oxygen depleted environment to off gas into nitrogen. So when we do full nitrogen removal in a treatment plant, it just eventually turns into that nitrogen gas to go through our atmosphere, which is the bulk of our atmosphere. So, yes,
It's not much different than just regular nitrogen, but
yeah,
you might put on your lawn as a fertilizer.
correct. Yeah, it comes in many different forms, but we call it inorganic, just, you know, doesn't have that carbon in it, and it's representation of the bulk of the nitrogen that you have at a treatment plant. Drawing on your question a little bit further, those are the types of nitrogen that would cause like algal blooms in big lakes, so that's why they're regulated. So the total inorganic nitrogen limit of 0.15 is carried down from that basin plant along with total phosphorus to mitigate the chance of those algal blooms in the lake. Hope that answers your questions. Okay. So moving into the design phase, we had two main focuses to help us meet that limit and provided some other advantages for total system recovery. So we wanted to meet that total inorganic nitrogen limit, again, focusing primarily on that ammonia that was bleeding through. And we wanted to use the proven treatment process. For the debrine process, we wanted to get a little bit higher recovery, and then we wanted to increase that level of reliability to give us operators, department staff confidence that it's going to function as intended and meet our objectives. I'm gonna pause there for going into the next section, but any questions on that?
No.
So the changes from the pilot for design, to elaborate on those 2 points I just highlighted, we removed the sand filters because we identified through the pilot and through the water quality sampling that we performed that the existing secondary treatment system, those oxidation ditches out there, big raceway structures, those remove nutrients really well, especially phosphorus, better than we thought. Fargo doesn't typically sample for phosphorus if it's not going to for the Stern Valley discharge. So we had that opportunity to collect that data and confirm that with what's already in the existing process that we're pulling from, our nutrients were pretty well. And then we wanted to use a process model to confirm that with the other membrane processes and there's a chemical addition with sodium hypochlorite or bleach, which is used in other parts of this process. You can remove that ammonia through that step, just through chemical addition in the same way drinking water wells do chlorination for their treatment process called breakpoint chlorination. But essentially just trying to emphasize there that it's a proven process. It's used throughout the country, throughout water and wastewater facilities. And we don't need to pilot that because it's just more of a simple water chemistry calculation. It's easy to model and we know it works. For the brine minimization process, we removed that desalter and replaced it with the brine softening and a secondary reverse osmosis process. That led to higher total system recovery, plus brine waste, and it also met all of our lake water quality objectives, while being more reliable and proven. I won't probably touch on this later, but myself and our sub-consultant that led kind of membrane processes at the time, we went and toured the Chino Basin Desalter Authority's facility. They had the same lime softening process there that they use for the same purposes. Talked to the operational staff, understood what was required to operate and maintain that system within their data. So it was a full scale technology that's been employed at other wastewater facilities for the same purpose. And that brine waste reduction, just to help kind of cement how much that little difference from 98.7 to what we know that 99.2%, that 0.5% means an extra 60% reduction essentially in that evaporation pond area, which is again a big deal up here when we're looking at limited land availability, environmentally sensitive areas. We took that a step further with the brine management and replaced conventional evaporation ponds with an enhanced evaporation system. So conventional evaporation ponds are essentially just an open pool. You dump the brine there, let the wind and the sun do the work. And over time, at the end of the life cycle, so you eventually remove that brine. But what we looked at with enhanced evaporation system, which uses basically an HDP matrix. And it uses like a biomimicry approach to create more surface area for that water to evaporate off. So again, we went and toured a full-scale facility at a mining operation near the California Nevada border. Myself, David Lawrence, John, Troy, and my design team talked to the operators, understood how it worked, and then went through a budgetary proposal process with that team. Following that, they came out to the site, looked at our site constraints, and a preferred design strategy and approach that we work towards with plant design. So what we're able to do there is stream the evaporation pond area. I'll show the next slide. Yes, that significant reduction. So it reduces that evaporation pond footprint, which also reduces our environmental and wildlife concerns that we discussed here in the EIR and have some presentations. So looking at that area reduction, our former size is 3 acres partially. We could then fall lake area in the purple, and in that green color, we see the revised size. So that's demonstrating how much less area you need with that enhanced evaporation system to do the same thing in less space. So it shrinks that construction area, the area for environmental concerns, and it gets us out of that multi-lake area, which is a key consideration. You will notice here, and we'll touch on it a little bit, that does use part of the emergency storage area. We talked through that with John and Troy while EcoVap, enhanced evaporation system manufacturer, was out here. So we understood how much volume we needed to preserve. So use that as emergency storage during all weather. We did that by segmenting basically, so we'll show that in the site a little bit later in the presentation. Pause there, any questions on those 2 slides?
No, I was glad to see the brine pond get smaller. When I was
Yes.
looking at it, talking out loud, my husband was like, what are you looking at? I'm like, oh. pond.
Yeah, it's unfortunately another limitation for inland facilities. What that challenge you guys are facing is the same for like desert facilities, right? They're not next to a brine line. They can't discharge it to the ocean. They've got to do something within their space. And there's a lot of stuff emerging in this industry as far as mechanical, environmental things like that to get rid of that brine in less area. So it is, again, just like some of our limits of technology, the other equipment is kind of pushing the envelope on what the wastewater industry needs to do to help manage that brine. So for the water quality for the,
I was just gonna ask, is there a smell to that pond?
no, we wouldn't expect significant smell unless you let it dry out. That's where it becomes a concern. So we would have provisions to keep that wet. We want to keep it wet so it doesn't dry out and become,
Or what would the smell be like if it dried out?
John may have a better idea because he's been around it, piloted it. It's not, I'll say it this way, it's not worse than the sludge from the dewatering system. That's where we have to cite it.
It smells like a wet mouth.
Does that smell carry, or is that, how far can you smell?
Nice.
No, if it's,
Smell of wine.
yeah, I know we're saying brine, so we might be thinking like the sludge, but it's actually wet. It just looks kind of like full of water. So for instance, when we went out and toured the mining facility, they were made with salts in that pond, but there was no odor. Our brine would have different characteristics, but we wouldn't expect to see it. It's not any worse than the wastewater that already provides. So the final design water quality based on the final treatment process we ended up with meets all of our objectives. You'll note if you look back on that prior slide from the pilot study, our design for effluent water quality pilot was from one of the RO systems. This represents the combined stream from the brine process and the primary RO system. So this is what would go out to Stanford Marsh. So this is our design criteria. This is what we're trying to. So you'll see that full organic nitrogen with that chemical addition and the process modeling for the RO systems. We've got that down below the 0.15. And the total phosphorus and everything else above that still meets our limits, while we did a higher total system recovery of 99.2%. And again, I'm going to emphasize these are very stringent limits. This is no small feat for a borrower to pursue this, and it does hit the limits of technology for what's out there. We'll be able to employ to get to these numbers. So for context on the permitting for NPDES specifically, NPDES permit program is issued by the state of California, and it is to provide agencies such as BARWA the regulatory framework monitoring compliance requirements to ensure that discharges do not affect waters of the U.S., which Big Bear Lake is. So we are bound by the monitoring reporting requirements. There are limitations on what we can do if we don't meet those water quality objectives. In our case, with this facility, if we don't hit those limits, we turn off the system and figure out what's wrong. That water does not go to the lake. And we have several provisions throughout the design through online analyzers and monitoring that would alarm operators if something's wrong and we're not hitting our limits. That water diverts back to the headers before it gets the pipeline. So for the NPDES permit, we submitted the draft report waste discharge application in February 2022. They are still preparing the draft NPDES permit. They typically are always, especially lately, will prioritize projects with a more near-term implementation timeline. It is very typical for the regulatory process, specifically for NPDES permits, that you do not get those issued until the construction phase or close to startup. Ideally, we would get that draft permit during design. There would be some discussions, coordination with the regional board, and we would know more specifically the details and nuance of our final permit before we go into construction. But that is the typical timeline that they do prior to that project's close to the implementation of construction, and we would get the permit after final design. Just for extra background here, so I know we've talked about this before, the regional board tells you what you need to meet. They cannot tell you how to meet it. So the regional board cannot look at our PDR and say, you cannot use this process. I just want to clarify that. There's a little bit of gray area there sometimes. So that PDR will be submitted to the regional board as supplemental information, but it does not need to be approved by the regional board before they issue a permit. It is permissible with the design changes because we have demonstrated that we can meet them.
One question for you.
Yeah.
So if the regional board is preparing a draft NPDES permit, and the draft is prepared, does that mean you have a permit?
No, we do not. We do not have the draft. They're preparing the draft permit.
Well, yeah, so my question is, once it's prepared, does that mean, as you mentioned, that the permit is not really issued until the point of construction?
Correct, yeah, so
So is there a gray area where you might not get it to start? Or if you're in draft form, does that mean that basically you're proceed with construction until?
correct, yeah, so we would have expected a response from the regional board when we submitted the application, if there was an issue. The fact that they're preparing a draft permit, we have confirmed that with them through outreach. We would have a final permit that it goes from draft to final, it will allow a comment period from the agency before it's finalized. So yeah, the fact that they're preparing a draft permit indicates that it's a permissible project and they would issue a final permit following that review period.
Yeah, and we have a letter confirming
receipt of it and the preliminary design, the draft permit is being all worked on.
So getting into the details of the preliminary design before we look at costs. Again, refreshing on the pilot process flow diagram, bringing this up again, we can flip back and forth between the final process flow diagram, just let me know. I just want to emphasize here, the ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, and UVOP step, that's kind of a core of the advanced treatment system, so that remains into our final design. You'll see the next slide here, we drop the sand filter, just, you change that brine implementation process. So the secondary, that one would go straight into the ultrafiltration, is pre-treatment for that reverse osmosis system. In the second half of the pilot, we actually did do that. We bypassed the denitrification sand filters and went straight to the ultrafiltration membranes. And then what we're changing below in that dotted box, it's still a brine minimization process. It is not packaged, so it does have a bigger footprint. That has the brine softening step, which do the softening through lime, that removes constituents that can scale up the membrane. So it helps us remove that and discharge that as sludge to the existing watering system. And then the softened brine then goes as secondary reverse osmosis process for recovering product water, that dash line there. This process will only have one waste stream, so the pellets from the other processes only has brine. And then we show that enhanced evaporation system, which again would be located on that prior slide. What we're showing that we didn't show in piloting, that we didn't perform during piloting, is the product water stabilization step at the top and ammonia removal. So product water stabilization is required for all RO systems are excellent because it's corrosive, it's low in pH, it's low in alkalinity. That can cause problems with pipes, and it would, of course, cause problems with big barrel if you discharge it with low pH and low alkalinity. So we use carbon dioxide and lime, the same lime slurry that we use in the brine softening process to stabilize that water, so it's not as aggressive before we discharge it. Again, very typical, very conventional stuff, essentially in all our processes. And in that ammonia removal step, we're able to go on the back end some of the sand filters, which is really just the polishing step to remove that ammonia. We have instruments online that help us understand what that dose needs to be. And we take care of that on the back end before use water sent to the pump station and sand filter. Any questions on that?
Yes. You mentioned the release of water into the Stanfield Marsh. I understand that that may not be the process now, that instead it will be dumped directly into the water.
I will touch on that in 2 or 3 slides, 4 slides maybe. So yeah, I do have a slide for that. We did have a discussion with that WD and came up with some adaptive management strategies. So the preliminary design did not include discharge to like the only Stanfield Marsh. We've got some points of explanation on at the end of this section.
You also mentioned turning around water that doesn't meet the standards. Does it ever leave the plant or will it be done here?
No, it's done here. So we just through instrumentation valves, online monitoring and water systems, it gets diverted through automated valves. So even if someone's not here at the plant or sitting at that process, those instruments online tell it to divert it. So it wouldn't even go to the effluent pump station, it would go to the headworks and go back to the process. So how this looks on this site, is we've got the evaporation pond areas in the top left. It's basically that brine step. The brine softening is within that process room, along with all the other process equipment. This is really just to help understand the scale of that process room. Again, we changed the treatment process, that expanded the footprint. We do have some chemically intensive processes here to help us do the permit limits, which is You see on that bottom band of the process room, that's all chemical storage there, and I have a more detailed that on the next slide. So circling back to a point I made earlier about the emergency storage area. On the top left there, we show the evaporation pond. We would grade that, we'd have a double line leak detection system on both sides. And the enhanced evaporation system is there on the left side, along with its own pumping system. So we've got a burn in between, so we can preserve that right side of the evaporation pond area for emergency storage. Once that water becomes too concentrated with solids to go over that enhanced evaporation system, we discharge it to the basin on the right to sit until it's removed several years later. But that does preserve the emergency storage area for John and the staff to divert flows if they need to during wet weathers. This next slide, I'm not going to go through this, this is again just to help demonstrate the level of involvement of the process. Every box you see there is a tank, a pump pad, skid mounted equipment. And this houses the entire treatment process. So the other kind of driver cost and footprint here for this is that we might not set aside of the full other climate. The only exception is the feed tanks and product water tanks on the left side that is shown and these. Because it might actually be advantageous for us to bring that water closer to ambient temperature and discharge. But again, just want to illustrate here kind of the scale of involvement in the amount of equipment. And then where this would be located on the site, those balancing chambers can be demolished and we can add a pipe in between those horseshoe ponds on the left. That have one balancing EQ pond down there. We have added some piping to allow the operations staff the flexibility they need to not have to use this balancing chamber that we're putting over here.
Question. Any consideration for the process room to be the existing metal building?
We did, so because the metal buildings only have so much space, you have to separate equipment, those pipe runs and the work done to take the fluid or be part of the process fluid back and forth. And then for most of these processes that require chemicals, extend chemical lines or add new chemical facilities proximal to those other process areas of different buildings. The cost stated to pan out. It was the same cost for located somewhere else as it was to increase the building footprint. So we did look at that, but it just didn't pencil out. Didn't make sense. There's limitations on how far you can take some chemical lines before you run into issues. Let's say off gas with a chemical or those lines being filled up.
Okay.
So the design approach for the advanced water purification system, I wanted to just emphasize a few points here. The main overarching point is that we want to balance operational redundancy with cost. We needed to keep costs as low as possible, but we also want to provide flexibility with redundancy for continued operations during maintenance periods or downtime and the equipment replacements that we would need to perform. So we sized the equipment to accommodate fluctuations in those daily and monthly flows that we see here. Again, being in a resort community, I think it's cold weather and snow, there are significant fluctuations in monthly flows that we can see that, in lower elevation in the facility. And then we did not employ full redundancy since this is a non-critical facility. What I mean by that is John and his staff currently have redundancy within each process at this treatment plant because it's a critical facility in the sense that if something doesn't work, we can't have water back up here, right? If that spills, it has to go to the center valve. With the AWPF, we're essentially a side stream main treatment process. So if something goes wrong with it, you take it down, that's just the flow continues to go down with center valve. We're not shaving off of the inflow flow. So we did reduce redundancy where we could save costs, not to the point where it limited, yielded production for our fire estimates. We repurposed the decommissioned cannibal tanks. Cannibal tanks are in the former process that did not work out. They've been sitting there on the north side of the facility. And they serve a good purpose for AWPF equalization, which again helps us deal with that daily variation of flows. And capture more water during the process, kind of balance it through the RO system. RO systems like a more consistent flow, they don't have a broad range of operating flows that they can hit. So we repurpose those tanks, provide some EQ. Then with the brine softening process that we ended up with, I mentioned the chemical intensive needs, and it has line function. I think it by easily, and talking with Chico-based Desalter Authority, Junction, and has experience working climate at a facility itself. We planned for a 1 month offline period that we would need to take the system offline, clean primarily that line system and salts contact verifier that softens the brine. And we would plan that for a little 12 month, for you guys, depending on whether it's wet or dry here, that's kind of mid-spring or October. And the reason we want to do it during low flow is because that sacrifices us yield and product water that we want over the course of time. So that is a change from the prior process. We do need that 1 month offline period for some maintenance. And then as we talked about before, more kind of cost saving value engineering measures, repurposing that emergency storage pond to the advanced evaporation system.
I'll estimate if it's offline for a month, the loss of water production.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, I think we had a range of 1950 to 2230. If I recall correctly, so we still expected that 1950 number, which is 1958 year, which is what we've carried through on and the funding application documents, production. So yeah, that's why we do it during the low flow month, and then having that equalization also helps with the capture more entire flow months. So we can still meet our yield target.
Depending on the situation, we end up with like this month of October, we've been under 1 million gallons a day coming. Well, from the city, it's been like 600,000, so overall, it's been really low flow month based on that.
October tends to be our lowest flow month. It's obviously also dependent on weather, so you're talking about an average.
Yeah.
Or actually, it could be a lot higher, or it might be lower.
Correct.
What's happening?
And just to provide some context, since you asked the question, the way we got to that number is we looked at the last 15 years of data, input flow data per year for this facility. And projected out what we could treat and sized it at the size of recovery that we're trying to hit. And we just assumed no increase in flows, figure as a less than 0.5% growth rate in population and connection. So we assumed the last 15 years looks like the next 15 years. And projected out how much flow we would get at the target recovery. So yeah, that last 15 years had dry and wet periods, so we would expect the same for the next 15. There's no definitive way, obviously, to get to that estimate and guarantee that, but we can use some reliable input data from constant flows to help us understand what that range is. So that's why we're at 1950, we can still meet. But yeah, it would fluctuate year to year depending on weather conditions. So for the effluent pipeline alignments, we ended up with 3 main alignments to consider. The we landed on for multi-criteria comparison. We looked at several different iterations and an alternative within each one of these, so that'd be 15 to 18 if you were to draw them all out. So these are the 3 we kind of honed in on as the most viable. We got the North Shore in the dark blue, the Meadow Lane in the yellow, and then it's cut off there in line, but the neighborhoods is the orange south there. And where we ended up was the Meadow Lane alignment. It's the lowest cost and shortest length of piping. It does require more easements and property owner coordination. But again, looking at cost for the project, this was by a good margin the most cost affordable alignment to go with. So the adaptive management, putting much in charge, Vice Chair Larry brought that up earlier. So it's like with referencing, he spoke with NWD that expressed an interest to be able to bypass Danville Marsh if there were any issues in its access. And look at increasing the length of the pipe to get to the lake, provide that diversion or go to the lake and not the marsh. The lake discharge would require an additional 7,300 linear feet piping and 100 horsepower pumping, which is now a significant cost. We did not include that in the PDR after we circled back with FWD and came up with some alternative adaptive management strategies if or when that bypass in the marsh needs to be performed. So I got it listed out here, and I will read through it so we're clear on the coordination with our other agency team partner. We can coordinate that periodic maintenance of the marsh with the periodic maintenance that we would need that 1 month period I mentioned on the prior slide to allow for that maintenance or inspection. We could stop or limit discharge through the Replenish Big Bear system and discharge less or all the flow to the Eastern Valley through the existing process. We will add the Big Bear Lake discharge point and BS permit with regional board to allow borrow that flexibility. We do want to extend the pipeline later, it's in the permit. That happens frequently within PDS permits, even though the infrastructure is not there, they will provide it as a allowable discharge point. So we have the flexibility in the future. What we did include in the PDR is we upsized our electrical loads. So we have that extra horsepower capability if we should upsize those pumps to get it to the lake. And then the capital plan would need to include that future pipeline expansion and pump upgrades, so we make sure that financial planning is accounted for. We need to exercise that strategy in the future. And all this, the adaptive management plans would be in the borrowing NWP storage agreement that will need to be executed to understand the conditions of when water is discharged from the lake. Does that answer your question? That's your question.
Somewhat. When you talk about upsizing the pump station, are the lines there that can feed that pump right now?
Correct, so for the PDR, say we have lower horsepower pumps, the pipeline goes to Stanfield Marsh. In the future, if we want to go to the lake, we would tie into that Stanfield Marsh pipeline, go that extra 7,300 feet to the lake. But you have to upsize those pumps just because you have more elevation, more friction losses that requires more pumping energy to get it to the lake.
I'm primarily focused on the electricity itself. We need power to charge electric trash trucks and we can't get it. As they said, they don't have the capacity, not in watts, but in lines. So if you need the lines, do we know if the lines are there to do this, right?
It would be powered from this facility. So we do have the infrastructure here. The pumps would be charged from here. So yeah, there would not be pumps at the terminal point Stanfield Marsh that would pump it further. We would upsize the pumps here and extend the pipeline so the water can help it.
So we have no idea what this request by MWD will cost. The extra cost.
I do have numbers on that. We did provide those, so I can circle back with that to perform the definitive answer. But yes, we did cost that out. So understand the scale of that in time.
Okay, I'd like to see that.
Yep. Give it out here. Okay, so for the cost estimate, we run through the basis of it. AACE is a corporation that sets the standard for civil engineering in terms of cost estimate classification systems. We did look at kind of a graph for this several board meetings ago, and I do have that on the side if we want to look at that further. But these cost estimate classification systems look at the level of project definition versus an accuracy range. They call it an accuracy range, it would really be interpreted as a confidence interval. how confident we are, our estimate as engineers, will be prepared, that it will fall within, in this case, -15 to +20% of the estimate we came up with. That's after contingency, so total project cost, we will look at next page. So as you move forward in project definition, towards say 100% design, that accuracy range narrows. So we're at 100% design, our accuracy range is negative to +5%, for instance. That's simply because as we develop the design, we understand more of the intricacies and ancillary facilities that make up some of the unaccounted for costs that we have now. Just as detailed design develops, you get a further understanding of the different cost elements and unit costs that you need to factor in. So right now, we're at a project definition of 25%. Again, the follow-on of this PR presentation would be a 30% deliverable on the final preliminary design report. And as we move forward, your cost estimate increases and your action range narrows down. I'm happy to elaborate on that further, circle back, and again, I do have a slide that kind of illustrates that. The cost sources, we have vendor and manufacturer equipment proposals. We reached out to some contractors, local, that have done pipeline pump station work up here, local to, and then fire that have done wastewater treatment facilities. Pre-engineered metal building manufacturers to help us understand calibrate our unit costs that we're using in our cost model. And then unit quantity takeoffs, which means we're looking at actually measuring out how many square feet of the building we have, the size of the tanks, the linear feet of piping that we can attribute a unit cost to, instead of just adding a placeholder or doing a lump sum amount. And then lastly, engineering judgment based on our past projects here, rely heavily on those. The figure does have kind of a extra expense for bidders that it's usually around 10 to 15% of what we have, maybe down the valley. And then dollar basis is November 2025 dollars. That's to remain consistent with the prior estimates that we shown. There is the VABA and tariff element to this. We have shown here in this bullet that it's not factored into the estimate. VABA is not because we're still trying to coordinate with the federal agencies, and quite frankly, they're trying to coordinate with themselves and how this translates to the water and wastewater industry. There's not a lot of equipment, package equipment or big equipment like the UV systems, for instance, that are all over America. So they are looking at waivers for specific pieces of equipment. And they are still kind of working through that. We're in close coordination with them, getting updates and engaging with them to understand how that impacts water, wastewater projects. And then tariffs are not factored into the estimate in the sense that we do not include a specific markup for them. They are factored in the sense that the equipment proposals that we've received over the course of the summer that feed into this estimate do factor in their current impacts and tariffs, but we cannot project what they might be 3, 6, 12 months from now. The way we deal with that final design, well, calibrate our costs to make it more accurate, is we would increase the frequency at which we request an updated budgetary proposals. So typically we would only do that at, say, at 30, 60, 90, 100% design step when we update the process of drawings and specs. We might do that twice as often to help us understand on a monthly or bi-monthly basis what those impacts are. Reason being, with that and tariff requirement or impacts, these vendors are shortening the duration in which they're promising that price is good for. So where it might have been 90 days before, sometimes it's down to 30 now. So they don't lock in their price that we want.
A couple of questions. I'll say, how long is this estimate good for? We got to -15% to +20%, so it's kind of a wide range of possibilities. And is there consideration for the future? It's good for a year, 2 years, and I understand what you're saying. You're gonna have to kind of look at it as you're progressing through it. But if you had a way of looking into the future.
Yeah, well,
What would you guess?
The simple answer is it's much less than a year because we would get to 60% design still here. And we are scoped and eventually provide with updated cost estimate with our design deliverables. So we have 30, 60, 90, 100 we're gonna do for this project. We would update that estimate at every point. So the schedule, I mean, but from 30 to 60%, you're maybe looking at 6 months until that next design deliverable, for instance. So it would be updated more frequently. If you were to have this as a standalone estimate and say how long is it good for, with the VAT and tariffs and the fact that we're actually seeing an increase in inflation on wastewater equipment, especially electrical equipment, it's going back up. It's not maintaining, let's say, like what the general public's used to, like the CPI is actually going back up. So my answer would probably be, 2 to 3 months. And that's kind of the frequency if we want to go back to these equipment vendors and see how updated estimates to understand, how the economic climate is influencing this cost.
There's been talk before about new technologies being cheaper. Is there consideration for that, or are we just looking at increased costs?
Yeah, do you mean longer term as?
Yeah, but longer term. I guess that's the best way to put it, but again, there's been discussion that the longer you wait, cheaper the technology gets.
Correct.
Is there truth to that, or?
Generally, I mean, if you're discounting the cost, right, from inflation, as technologies become more established, you get more competitors in the space, they optimize their designs. Typically, yeah, when you discount them, they're gonna be cheaper. And we've seen that even with, say, the UV system, for instance, if you were to discount what we have here, it is cheaper than it was 4 years ago. That's not the case for all equipment, especially when we're looking at more advanced treatment processes like this. You could go the other way and say, well, in 3, 4, 5 years, there could be new technology that helps us meet these limits better, but at a higher cost. So it could go both ways, but generally, I think your sentiment is correct that as established technologies have more years of being successfully implemented and operated, they tend to be cheaper now.
So if you look at the entire package, as opposed to just specific technologies, is there any chance it'll get cheaper in the future, or do you anticipate, I'm talking about the whole package? Or would you anticipate it to get more expensive in the future?
I wouldn't just because of inflation, it's gonna get more expensive. Again, if you're discounting it for specific pieces of equipment, it could be cheaper, but generally, the cost for it can go almost due to inflation. It's just the rate of inflation and how that impacts it. That's a tough question. I give you.
No, I think you understand where I'm trying to.
Yeah, it's not, I would say it's not gonna be cheaper, no.
Okay.
Yeah, your dollar you spend now is critical in the future with the inflation discount rates, Any other questions on the basis cost estimate?
Thank you.
Early on, the feds were impressing on you a $22 million contingency, which you thought was excessive. Now I see here we're talking 11.5. Would that still qualify us with the WIFIA or not?
At this point, we haven't reached out to the EPA, which is who provides the WIPIA loan. So we haven't reached out to them with a new cost estimate to see what they would suggest based on what they've seen. So I don't know, I can't answer that question at this moment, and especially with the government shutdown, probably not at all for a while until that has changed. But obviously, I mean, the good thing is as the project design progresses, like Matt is suggesting that you can get the estimates a little closer to where you think the number is really gonna come out, as opposed to, having a very preliminary concept And coming up with a number for that, and then getting to a point where you're now at 30%. And having a better feel for. What, and the pilot study being complete, what the numbers are actually gonna come out to be like. So in answer to your question, we don't know. Because we can't really reach out to them. We didn't pursue the Whitby loan. Which is the other piece behind that. Had we pursued the Whitby loan, we may have been getting feedback from them. Based on this, to do do a different loan amount based on that. And what we're seeing here.
And you originally mentioned a percentage of the project that could be from federal grants.
80%.
80%.
80% can become between any kind of federal source, so grants or loans.
So in this case, if it goes up to 105 million, we could actually
Get,
try for more.
try for that 80-something million number for between grants and loans, federalized.
Okay.
Yeah, next David, I can elaborate on that a little bit as well. So thinking back to that cost limit classification system as project definition increases, our accuracy range narrows. What we typically do is drop that to CS moving on as well on the engineering side. How EPA would be alone would account for that. That's just, we have to circle back with them at the 30% design and understand how they would want to apply that contingency. My understanding, they do that because they don't want public agencies coming back and asking for more money after the loan is closed, because that puts everybody in a tough spot. So in this case, from the last estimate, you guys saw the comparison slide later on the total cost. Our contingency dropped down 20 to 15%. Again, just because we're more confident what our design includes. And then our unaccounted for costs dropped from 3 to 2%. Unaccounted for costs, you can think of as ancillary equipment and facilities that are not defined at this level of design detail, but we do want to have a little buffer there to account for those additional level of detail that we will find through design and development. So yes, we were talking about, I would have pulled it up. So we've got, starting from the top for what makes up this $105 million numbers. We separated this into the 4 bid packages essentially that we are scoped to provide. So treatment, effluent pump station and pipeline, the evaporation pond, and the monitoring wells, which I didn't touch on those in the site plan, but those are 7 monitoring wells. Now, the extent of the evaporation pond to help us further monitor any potential leaks, and it is a regulatory requirement for outlets such as the evaporation pond. So treatment includes everything at the site from electrical to that process building, all the equipment in it. Effluent pump station includes the pumps themselves, the pipeline stand go marsh. And an evaporation pond includes everything that top up to that site. And so degrading, earthwork, lining the ponds, the enhanced evaporation system, and the pumps that go along with it. The implementation costs we show there at the bottom, the 16,868,000, that is a fixed cost based on Barbara's budgeting for Replenish repair, which includes costs like the final design, program management, funding and financing, regulatory coordination, et cetera. So we kept that fixed, be consistent with the other numbers and funding documents we've been bringing in. So this total project cost represents, again, this 25% level of project definition. And its increase is primarily due to 2 things. We have changed the treatment process since that $86.7 million number is presented. The brine softening and brine ionization process, for instance, that we switched to, that's no longer a package system. It requires procuring that equipment separately. That increases the footprint, which increases the footprint of the building. We have to keep everything inside. The building is a significant part of the cost. It's got to be 20 to 25 feet high installed, I think up to 30 in the middle actually. And so kind of matching that sled building height that we have on the north side of the facility currently. Because a lot of those tanks and equipment need that height clearance. So that building footprint expanding does increase the cost, and the differences in the treatment process further increase that cost. The second thing is, I mentioned it earlier, we're seeing this sustained inflation in the water wastewater space. Primarily electrical equipment, but also other major equipment that comes as a package or a skid, something like the UV system or those more of skids that we have. We're seeing that climb back up, dropping down. As I said, kind of consistent with the CPI, it's sustaining at a higher level. The other component of this cost, we're getting to
I've got a
the.
question before we.
Yeah,
Just so I understand a little bit better, how did you calculate the implementation cost? I mean, is there a formula to that, or is it just a seat of the pants?
yeah, that's a good question. So early in a program such as this, you would use roughly 30 to 35%. And again, that's going to cover program management, admin, funding and financing, regulatory, final design, preliminary design, piloting in this case. 30 to 35% is typical. The way we've calibrated that, Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, but as we move forward in the program, some of those costs are actually realized. So when we do like the cash flow model for Christine, we actually look at total spent and total that budgeted based on that initial assumed percentage. And then we kind of calibrate, move funds in between those phases if we need to, based on, say, for instance, regulatory compliance for this program. That was higher than we expected when we first started because of the unique water quality objectives here and the regional board coordination. So, but we didn't spend as much in, say, funding and finance. So some of that kind of moves around within that bucket. But as we move forward and we get some of these contracts executed and we realize these costs, we can kind of sit at that number with the confidence that we're going to hit that because we've gone through a lot of those implementation steps already. So the short version, you 30 to 35% up front, and as we move forward in the project, we can kind of calibrate that, kind of set on a fixed number that stays in the budget.
Okay, I either read or heard, FTEs, with this organization. So I just assumed that number was based upon more FTEs we need here, but it means something else as well.
No, yeah, so implementation is basically what there's not a soft cost to rent CMS, it's everything aside from construction up to the point the facility can be started up. That's the simplest way to look at it. So that's why we have everything down to that construction contingency line. And above that 16.8 number, that's all construction costs. Implementation is everything else you need to get the program executed, the project delivered.
Seems like a big number. It seems like a big number. I've built things before, and I understand what you're saying, is you don't anticipate, well, yeah, with this, you know, landscaping has to be done, or this has to be. But I never had a 30% implementation or contingency with things that were not anticipated. So it seems high.
Yeah, it's so not a contingency, that does capture like our program management contract, environmental, study clearance, contracts, design, et cetera. So to your point, like an effluent or for a pump station or a well project, you would not have 30 to 35% as a placeholder. Those projects are part of that, but for the program project of this magnitude, with all the regulatory and environmental considerations that go into it, it does carry a higher percentage. So our 30 to 35% is based on other California recycled water local reuse projects. That's kind of how we did that industry standard bracket there. And then, yeah, we just calibrate it as we go along as needed. So yeah, none of this is all the upfront costs. So kind of segue into the O&M, which you're alluding to a little bit. Our annualized O&M cost considers energy, which that rate is based on documentation data warrants provided for the solar system out here, what energy costs for the wastewater treatment plant currently. It includes chemical deliveries, equipment replacements, labor, which is the additional FTEs you would need to operate this facility, and PDS monitoring compliance activities for the discharge permit, It is on a 20-year basis, and that second to last bullet is alluding back to that 1 month of downtime. For the O&M estimate, we conservatively assumed 12 months of operation, so we didn't reduce that by a month, but roughly 8%. We kept it at 12 months to be conservative in this annual O&M cost. The 20-year basis is reflecting not the life cycle of this plant, right? We've got a plant just north of us that's been there 50, 60 years. A lot of these structures at wastewater facilities will last that long. The 20-year basis for a facility like this provides a good life cycle estimation in regards to the major equipment that would need to be replaced within that time frame. So, for example, the UV disinfection systems lamps replaced every 3 years. Pumps we replace every, say, 10 to 12 years. The RO membranes, depending on where they're at in the process, could be annually or every 10 years. So we make sure we provide a long enough basis to capture those regular equipment replacement timelines. So our annual O&M costs have those annualized back then. We're not, if you just look at the first year of O&M, that equipment replacements would be much lower, but that's misleading for folks like Christine that need to plan for a longer basis and factor in there with the CIP. So the annual O&M is at $4,331,000 with a FTE labor increase of 6.5 employee equivalents. That 4.3 increase you'll see compared to the prior is largely chemical related to all those feed limits with the new process we came up with. And looking at this more specifically, the last estimate compared to 2021 was in November 2025 dollars. We had escalated that to what we assume would be the midpoint of construction at the time. That is typical for these estimates, is that you escalate to the midpoint of construction to reflect what a bidder would actually bid the bid base, because their costs are realized from the point of bid to the end of construction. So that's why that 2021 estimate was at November 2025 dollars. For the sake of direct comparison, our PDR estimate, same dollar basis. So again, that roughly $19 million increase you see there is largely because of change in the treatment process, or meet our objectives, have more operator friendly process. And that's sustained inflation since our last estimate in the major equipment that we're costing in. And then again, to reiterate, the annual net cost is primarily extra energy costs for the facility. We have to find the time.
I have a question about the FTEs. That's not something a number that I paid attention to. Is that what we were expecting? Is that?
That's, I think it's one more than the original estimate was.
Okay.
And that's probably based on the new, equipment for bryoionization.
Yeah, correct. It was 5.15 total, which included admin, finance, staff, and staff. The one FTE increase is the advanced evaporation system requires more attention than if you just had a conventional open pond. And then that brine softening step, through discussions with the Chino Basin Desalter Authority, we added like a half FTE to that as well. So that's the increase from the past.
Thank you.
Before we go, I got another question. Is there consideration with using some sort of artificial intelligence to, I'll say, monitor everything? Do you need as many FTEs if you'll have a supercomputer watching for you instead?
Yeah, I don't think the industry is there yet for integrating AI, but there are sophisticated programming languages that you can implement on the SCADA end, which is a supervisory control system that Harvard currently has at their plant. So I would say it's more the sophisticated programming you can implement to streamline operations, set points, alarm setting, etc. But for a facility like this, it is actually required by the regional board that you have physical bodies that are a certain grade level of operation certification to be there for a certain amount of time. So not only is the technology not there, but the regulations wouldn't allow that substitution there. And I'll kick it to David Wallace to touch base on that.
So, originally, we were kind of thinking that we would, have a full board discussion on the next steps where the board would like to take this project moving forward. Obviously, I think the last few months, I would say, we've been stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. I think that's a pretty good analogy of where we've been with the project, and we're trying to get some clarification from the full board on where, where this project goes in the future. So that way, it would better help the agency moving forward and spending money on this project or not spending money on this project. So I think there was a board meeting set up for December 17th. If it's the board's desire, they can we'd kind of like to get some direction on what you would like to see at that meeting as far as this project. And kind of moving forward with it or not, however you guys want to proceed. So I don't know if you have any idea where you'd like to head.
Well, I know what you're saying, so you like the full board, I mean, I like to see us get to the, design phase. And I think that's valuable, all the money that's been spent up to this point. If we just stop it, we then throw everything away.
Yeah.
Let's have something that is, that we can hold on to and say, well, at least we ended up with this. So,
And when you're talking about spending money, I'm gonna go back to the grants. I mean, I would still, hope that we're able to march forward. Staying within the money that's been granted us.
Yeah, I mean, there is going to be some other costs and, as we could move forward with the design, funding and financing, and there's other, project admin costs and stuff like that, that will be, that the borrower will have to bear. But the majority of the design itself is obviously covered. But there are some other ancillary costs that the agency would have to bear.
just to tag up, onto that. I understand we could have some costs by just stopping to that, had not been anticipated.
If we, I mean, and
So either way, there'll be some. costs.
either way, there's costs. I mean, if we stop the project, there are costs to wrap the project up and settle up with all the different agencies that we've been involved with, and that we've gotten, they've done work on the project, consultant, and just paying people back, bills and all those things. So there are costs either way, moving forward or stopping.
Any comments?
I don't have the papers in front of me, but as I recall, when we talked about a body count, we wanted one person for the lab, one person to handle finance specific to grants, etc. To me, it looks like it's double.
And I don't recall when there was a number. Go ahead, Mandy. Did you look into that?
Yeah, I can clarify. I think, Vice Chair Walsh, what you're thinking of is the 3 FTE that was probably previously presented, the borrow staff presentation. The 2.15 FTE, so 5.15 in the previous estimate, went up to 6.15. 2.15 of that FTE was baked into our O&M cost. It was not separated out as an FTE. For this update, we rolled it all into an FTE equivalent. The O&M cost always included either a 5.15 FTE, the prior estimate, or now 6.15 FTE. So the O&M costs were accurate. I think the number that may have been presented was possibly miscommunication, but it's an FTE increase and commensurate cost increase between the two estimates.
Well, if the buying process has one full person, that's explanation part. But as I say, it seemed to me we were talking 3 bodies and now we're talking 6, so.
Yeah, and I think like Matt was saying, I think the other FTEs were included in this O and M cost, but never broken out. So. On the 17th, if, you know. Obviously, we've heard from Mr. Eric, what he'd like to see as part of that 17th agenda for this project. Is there any other input on what other board members would like to see as part of that 17th agenda? And if you don't want to provide them now, you can also, contact us and provide us with, some suggestions on what you'd like to see in that 17th agenda.
Well, Mr. Herrick. Mr. Herrick is saying prices. Whichever way you go, and that's essentially what I would ask for as well.
Okay, so. Mr. Herrick was just indicating that there were costs involved with stopping the project. But not indicating that he wanted to see those costs in stopping the project. If that's what you'd like to see, if that's the indication you would like to see both of those costs, again.
To me, it does affect which way I would want to go.
Right, and
Yes,
and the only thing I would tell you is that we won't be able to provide exact costs, as you know already. Because of the fact that the contracts for those grants say one thing. We won't know until we actually inform them, say whether, if the board decides to stop the project. Whether, how much of those grants we'd have to pay back, so what you'll have is. Our basic liability. Stopping the project, and then the cost to move it forward through design.
So
Okay.
that's what you could, I mean, I realize it's like a heavy lift to know. Where the costs are gonna be associated, if they're gonna fall within the grant or.
Right, it would be, I think we could probably come up with both those two scenarios moving forward, or just stopping the project. We could probably come up with, and again, they would have to be rough estimates on that, and the board would have to understand full well, right? Because we've handed numbers out before, and it has not gone over well when they've changed. So, right, so just to clarify. I would be, if I was close to Christine, she'd be kicking me now. She would, but we could come up with a close estimate, at least for on a preliminary basis.
I mean, I think nowadays it's hard to really figure costs out. I mean,
And that's talking about 2 or 3 months. This price is good for 2 months,
yeah,
right? I mean,
And just one more thing, it also depends on the shed. We're not gonna be able to get a hold of EDA to see what that cost is gonna be to either stop it or continue. The grants, they've already told us until we tell them we're gonna stop or not. They're not gonna tell us if they're, they told us that directly, so. Again, we can only do what we get.
I
well,
think if we're clear on that, I mean, obviously, we just can't assume anything.
yeah, it would have to be, like a rough estimate.
Yeah.
And just, I know it'd be difficult to get in touch with some of these agencies, I totally understand. It'd be difficult to get in touch with some of these agencies, I understand, but if you can't get in touch with them, the estimate probably isn't zero. So, yeah, so it'd be like a window or a range.
Yeah, we already know there's cost period.
Okay.
Right, and like, we're not getting out for free.
Yeah, okay.
So we give you, we probably, I mean, frankly, based on the grant, the grant agreements, we would probably make the assumption that we're paying it all back based on the grant agreement. So that those numbers you would have, that we would be paying that 100% back. Right, that's how we would approach. That's the way I would approach it.
Here's what it is.
Is what it is. Okay, any other questions or discussion items as far as, this project?
And I think we asked.
No.
A month ago, there was an email saying heads up, it
Yep.
could be issued.
Sure.
To 100 million. Now it's at 105. How, you're saying this is good for maybe 3 months?
Yeah, I mean. In today's economic climate,
Okay.
I would get updated, however,
Racing, that's all.
I'm speaking more to equipment costs, so I'm not expecting a drastic increase, but that number will be obviously in 3 months. You know, more or less, depending on our project definition, as we start to detail more out, it could come down a little bit, but we could get updated equipment costs that bring it up a little bit. I don't expect a huge difference, but again, we would provide updated estimates at 60, 90, and 100%, and we do have a sub-consultant that is specifically a cost estimator at the 60 and 100% level. We had scoped that in to help provide extra cost certainty, and that's, he specializes in that, so that'd be kind of a.
Oh, that's why you're talking here to generate this story, this report.
Say that again.
I'm hearing that we might get the final. The semi-final analysis within the year,
Yeah, I mean,
and that's,
The PDR would be completed before your next meeting.
I think I think what Mr. Walsh is indicating is the final design. You know, I can't remember exactly, it's about 12 something months out, something that
Yeah.
range.
I think the bid phase was scheduled to start in early 2027. So yeah, final design would be completed in that 12-month time frame, 12, 14 months.
Yeah,
So I think you're referring to the cost could.
and but we, again, during the process, we would know that. Only.
And that's why I did explicitly mention the escalation of endpoint of construction, because we always do that engineering cost opinions to reflect what the bidders actually.
well, we get people asking, and I would like to be able to. Soft pedal the amount, as far as we know, at any one point.
Yeah, and again,
No
that's,
surprises.
yeah, that's the best the best information we can provide at this point is that it's a $105 million project at this point.
And that accuracy range helps kind of demonstrate this discussion, I think, at a 25% level of design, that's the accuracy range we have stated, and we are intentional about that to be transparent. The fact that as you move forward through design, that range narrows. But there's factors associated with time, more detailed design development that may bring it up or down.
And before we lose you, I'm sorry Mr. Sid left, because he keeps saying. This won't remove pharmaceuticals, but I'm hearing it will,
Yes, it removes,
as far as any we know about.
yes, we tested pharmaceuticals, PFAS, PFOA, radionuclides, RO projects, 99%.
That kind of thing hits the community, and I want to be able, when people ask to say. This has been looked at, and this is being addressed, so. Don't panic.
Yeah, I mean, it is unfortunate when people make statements of public comment that you know is incorrect.
Well, but I believe. So.
And he may honestly believe what he's saying, he's just wrong.
Well, you have a newbie, Andy, who hasn't gone through all this, so.
Right.
I want him forewarned that. Everything in the grain of salt,
I'd say to him now, but he's saying.
not that kind of salt, but close enough.
And the number will be somewhat higher because of the MWD request. Right?
Well,
Well, that's not priced in, it's not going to be priced in, again, that's more. Lane's experience that I was speaking to, but as stated in that slide, that those adaptive management strategies were communicated with MWD. And they were informed that it's not in the PDR. Those types of provisions would come through in a subsequent agreement with Farm and MWD.
That was another cost, then,
What was that?
what he just said, that's another cost.
Okay, so are we ready to move on?
We are.
Okay. All right, let's move on to item number 6, information and committee reports.
I just wanted to, 6A, I just wanted to, provide the board a little update. In the staff report, it actually talks about cactus plants. I actually was informed day or two, yesterday that the Forest Service is gonna issue a permit for us to fix this line. The work actually will be done by Southwest Gas because their line is exposed with our line. So I expect that project actually to probably take place in the springtime, but, it has been a long and.
Well, that's
arduous
good
process.
news.
Yes, it is very good news. So. Yes, and we had to get a storm water permit for that. I won't even get into the. Yeah. And then, the force main project was completed on October 2nd. And John is working on the final, quantities and details with the contractor. For completion of that project itself.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Was theorized before that because that particular area maybe had a ball in it where gases would get trapped?
Yeah.
Is there a chance that that was, that, I'll call it bow, or that higher point might have been lowered?
Well, we have 2 brand new air releases on that line, right at the beginning of the.
Senior center.
Yeah, right after the senior center, and then there's one right next to Motel 6, so they are working great. It is PVC line, I don't think you have an issue with that.
Yeah, and when we removed the piping, it was definitely. Yes, and it was definitely, it was a line pipe, but it was definitely evident. Of the concern was definitely evident and was, that's why the pipe was worked on. And so we have pictures of exactly what took place, but you could see the thinning of the wall, the upper part of the pipe and the thinning of the wall of the pipe. So we were ecstatic removing that.
You dodged the bullet.
Pardon me?
You dodged the bullet.
Dodged, I mean,
Another bullet.
another bullet, I mean, there's been quite a few of them, but yes, that one we have dodged and, we are very happy we were able to TV. Both to the east and west as much as we could, you know, because the line is, tends to be full. And, based on the videos, it appears the line is in good condition, both going east and west at this point. That's what we believe, and, we don't foresee any more doing more work on this line.
On that section.
On that section, there's other sections that we,
How far did you camel?
couple hundred feet,
Fence.
yeah.
One way we could only go so far because of the wall. So to the west, we went 40 feet. And then we tried to do the section underneath the culvert, so we submerged, we got in 29 feet, came from both ways. Because you have water,
So there's still a remote chance that there are other.
not under the culvert, but anyway, so that we cambered, the longest camera run we got was from the stopping point all the way underneath the road and division. We ran into 3 45-degree bends, couplings in under the, right in the middle of the division. So we backed it out because we wanted to get the camera stuck, that could have been bad. So we backed it back out, we got 137 feet. From basically where that air release is, 50 feet to the east of that, and all the way underneath the road.
Yeah, the one underneath the culvert.
Good shape.
Yeah, it's in good shape. It's submerged in water, right? So the problem of piping like of this nature is H2S, right? And if you have it fully submerged all the time, you don't have that H2S problem.
Doesn't release, and the ends of each pipe we attached to on the culvert were in very good shape. They're still line thickness was the same on top.
So- We're very confident in that section and the one that went towards the east, which is like Motel 6 and Division, that we got 137 feet. And that appeared to be in great shape. So we're not gonna keep chasing and spending money on something we don't need to.
Sorry. Matt probably knows, every time you put a bin in if there's a couple of 45s or 345s. It's gonna create some sort of back pressure.
Those are already there.
Well, I understand that. I just wonder if it should be on a long-term capital improvement project, actually get rid of this.
It is so.
Were they old repairs? or
Well,
something?
No.
the issue is, okay, it comes across, it comes down, it starts to, right next to
Drops
it,
down.
it starts to dive down. So it dives down under division in 45s, then in 45s, and 45s, because it's on the east side of division, so you can't go straight. Because you can't go straight across the intersection to hit the side of the pipe that runs on the east side of division all the way down to our flow meter.
There's stuff in our way.
Yeah,
We would not.
Yeah.
They'll stay, they're in good shape, they'll stay, and the inefficiencies that we, that we are subjected to because of the 45s. That pump has been sized based on those inefficiencies, and we just deal with it, and it hasn't been an issue. We can pump, with the big pump, we can pump 5 million gallons a day through that pipe, and that is pretty much capacity of a 16-inch line. So. Anyway, other than that, I'm open for any questions. The board has.
Larry, do you have any questions?
From Mr. Lawrence?
Yes.
No? Okay. Oh, you have other questions? And are you okay with? Questions? Okay, all right then, moving on to item number 7, consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar will be enacted by one motion at the appropriate time. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If a detailed discussion is necessary, any governing board member may request that an item be removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. All right, does any board member wish to remove any items from the consent calendar? No?
I'll move it.
Okay,
Second.
all right, roll call please.
Director Herrick,
Aye.
Chair Segovia,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Walsh.
Fine.
All right, no old business, and let's move on to new business. Annual report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2025.
Thank you.
So. The attorney.
Presentation, we'll look at how the agency ended fiscal year 25 by comparing actual to budget. At fiscal year end, operating revenues were on budget. Operating expenditures were 13% below budget. Net non-operating income expense was $4 million lower than budget, and that was primarily grant driven. We'll talk more about that later. Total contributions, which is the connection fee revenue, was 4% higher than budget. So let's start with changes to budget. Near the beginning of the fiscal year, the governing board approves carryover appropriations for budgeted projects that were not completed in the prior fiscal year and will be completed in the current fiscal year. We had carryovers for operating expenses of $46,000, which included the projects listed on the slide. Additionally, the governing board may approve new appropriations during the fiscal year for unplanned projects that need to be completed during 5 years. We had new appropriations of $50,000 in the expenses for the capital improvement development center. Moving over to capital carryovers, there's $4.4 million in capital carryovers for the projects listed on the slide. And we had new appropriations of approximately $192,000 for the cactus box repair and the shop replacement. Now let's move on to the income statement. This is a snapshot of the income statement, and we will discuss the variances in the next slides. Beginning with operating revenues. Operating revenues were greater than budget by $11,000 or less than 1%, due largely to an increase in other operating income, which includes energy credits and an increase in waste disposal fees. This was partially offset by the reclassification of rental income to non-operating lease revenues during the period. The agency's largest operating revenues are sewer within the rates. The agency's goal is to keep rate increases at or near inflation. However, with the addition of Replenish Fair, the average has been above inflation. The average annual rate increase over a 10-year period is 6.1%. Over the 5-year period is 10.8%. And over a 3-year period is 15%. As you can see, when comparing percent changes, sewer user rates directly drive operating revenues. Average dry weather flows are 788 million gallons, as evidenced by the light blue line on the graph. When looking at the 10-year average, flows are approximately 727 million gallons. That's 61 million gallons less than average dry weather flows. Fiscal year 25 flows total 643 million gallons, which is lower than the dry weather flow average by 145 million gallons. Lower flows will affect the variable rates charged to the member agencies in subsequent years. We'll move on to operating expenses. As you can see, there were savings across multiple line items. We will discuss all of the variances in the next slides. We'll start with collection, treatment, and disposal. Collection, treatment, and disposal was 26%, but approximately 404,000 below budget. The largest savings were in repairs and replacements, power, sludge removal, and chemicals. Repairs and replacements expense was below budget by 174,000 or 56%. The full tar blankets and asphalt replacement at the station exceeded the capitalization threshold and were capitalized for accounting purposes. When we add those projects back in, actual expense was 182,000, which was 130,000 or 42% below budget, mostly due to timing associated with the sewer line painting and the CCTV project that was not completed until July, and then timing on associated with pump rebuilds. Power expense was lower by 113,000 or 22%, which was mainly a result of higher production of solar power, resulting in a decrease in electricity costs for the treatment plant and administration of the building. Sludge removal expense was below budget by 61,000 or 18%, which was due to lower sludge removal compared to budget. Sludge removal is budgeted based on removing just under 5,000 tons. However, actual tons hauled was just over 4,200, a reduction of approximately 800 tons for the year-to-date period. Chemicals expense was under budget by 36,000 or 35%, primarily due to increased purchases of polymer than budgeted. Salaries and benefits. Excluding GASB 68 and 75 pension-related adjustments, as salaries and benefits were below budget by 110,000 or 3%, with savings across all line items. The fiscal year 25 budget included adding an administrative staff position that was not filled during the fiscal year. When accounting for GASB 68 and 75 adjustments, salaries and benefits were higher than budget by 96,000 or 3%. And that's primarily a result of an increase in the unfunded liability for OPEB. This year, CalPERS combined the valuation reports for Classic and PEPRA members. As you can see, the total unfunded accrued liability decreased as of June 30th, 24, which increased the funded ratio. Calculations for the funding target reflect the expected long-term investment return of 6.8%. The investment return for fiscal year 24 was 9.3%, which is much higher than the expected return. On a side note, CalPERS has reported a preliminary return of 11.6% in fiscal year 25, which is much higher than the established discount rate. This will increase the funded ratio even further. The OPEB plan funded ratio decreased from 65.6% to 64%, which is primarily a result of increases in medical premiums. Contractual services professional were higher than budget by 16,000 or 8%, primarily driven by higher legal expenses, partially offset by lower engineering costs. Contractual services, other was lower in budget by 9,000 or 6%. As a result of electrical repair and maintenance projects that will be completed in the next fiscal year. Permits and fees administration, there were variances across the line items for permits and fees and administration. Permits and fees were below budget by 14,000 or 5%, primarily a result of permit fees and renewals coming in lower than budgeted. Insurance expense was lower than budget by 30,000 or 10%, due mostly to workman's compensation insurance. Lower workman's compensation insurance was primarily a result of an adjustment for longevity distribution, a 7% credit incentive program discount, and a 5% multi-program discount. Other operating expenses was below budget by 16,000 and 45%, mostly driven by lower education and training expense due to training that was budgeted and not attended. Budgeted depreciation was lower by almost 600,000. As the budgeted depreciation included asset elements for Replenish repair. Non-operating income and expenses. Non-operating income and expense had a negative variance of just under 4 million compared to the budget and was driven by much lower non-operating income by approximately 4 million, due mostly to expected grant reimbursements that are directly related to Replenish repair expenditures. With the RBD pause at the beginning of the year, expenditures were much lower than expected. Therefore, grant reimbursements were also lower. New connections to the system were slightly higher than budget, with connections coming in at 47 versus 45 budgeted. Fiscal year 24 included 62 non-recurring connections for a new hotel. The 10-year average is 57 per year, not including non-recurring connections. Cash balance ended 2.8 million higher than final budget. Lower operating expenses and depreciation, coupled with an increase in accounts receivable and interest earned, were the primary factors affecting cash balance. Debt service coverage is 7.39 times, which is higher than the covenant level of 1.2 times, as determined by the agency's current loan covenants. Debt outstanding is approximately 5 million. Fiscal year 2019 included the addition of the 2008 installment purchase agreement for the belt press. Fiscal year 23 included the addition of the RBD bridge loan. Debt capacity has increased as expected. Sorry, the agency has 25 million in debt capacity, which is at 7.39 times. In summary, the agency is financially strong, generates adequate cash flow, debt service coverage of 7.39 times, excess debt capacity, and reserves are fully funded. That concludes my presentation, and I hope you have any questions.
Any questions? Okay, Dr. Walsh.
When you say 25 million debt capacity, that's above and beyond Replenish figure.
No, that is the current debt capacity that the agency has right now. So those Replenish Big Bear rate increases that we didn't put in place last year, if we go forward, we'll put those in place, we'll increase your debt capacity so that it will cover that debt from or any type of loan that we may get.
So when we talked about $52 million borrowing, that would actually increase this capacity.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So it's actually the rate structure that increases our debt capacity, not the loan itself. To get the loan itself, we have to have the rate structure in place. So we would have to implement the rate structure that we didn't implement for the Replenish Big Bear project to get us to the debt capacity that we needed to for the regular loan.
Which is another part of my question. We did a 5-year increase
Yes,
with the intent of being able to finance operations for Replenish Big Bear, et cetera.
that's correct.
You paused 1 year.
We paused last year.
Now you can extend it then one more year? Or do we have to do a whole new setup to go beyond the original 5 years?
Last year, we put a 5-year rate structure in place. The board approved a 5-year rate structure going forward. So that 5-year rate structure is approved for the next 5 years.
But having paused one does not give you an extension on the other end.
No, the board did last year, gave us the extension because there's 4 more years of rate increases in the approved rate structure.
And then does that 4 years of increases prove to be adequate, or do you foresee having to boost again after the 4 years?
Well, really depends.
If you went ahead with it.
Okay, so if we went ahead with it, we would have to bring forward a funding and finance plan for the board to consider. Before I could answer that question, whether the existing rate structure moving forward would be enough to cover the debt service for the project.
Okay.
Is that it? Dr. Herrick, anything? All right, I don't have anything either. I just again want to tell you, thank you for your good comment. Really nice. All right, let's move on to finish that. So, public comment. Does anybody want to publicly comment on what we just saw? Ted?
So I was actually following along tonight with the slide presentation. And I was taking slides of what he was talking about. And running it through ChatGPT to ask questions, like what would be appropriate questions from the community. I actually texted those to Kendi. I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh, no, I knew I was getting stuff on my watch.
Yeah, that was
but-
me. But what I found interesting is on the final slide, when we talked about the total cost and all of that. I asked it to break it down per number of homes in Big Bear Lake and Big Bear City. And how much that would cost us at the $1.5 million. And I'm not saying this is any kind of science, but it is pretty smart, AI. It did say, if this matters at all, it said upfront local impact per home would be $951. Ongoing O&M per home would be $196 per year or $16 a month. 20-year total local burden would be $951 plus $3,920 equaling $4,871 per home. So that is based off the slides. And putting them into AI and kicking out, and with 80% grants coming in. I put that as an estimated number of grants coming in. So you might want to just use AI and throw all this numbers in there like I did, or I can email anyone the information from those slides that ChatGPT put out for me. But when I saw that, I'm like, that's not as bad as hearing $105 million. And it did make me think, well, is this worth it? And when I saw that, I thought, this probably is worth looking into moving forward. But as it was all being said, and I was reading the room, I even felt like maybe this isn't worth it. But I think it is important from our perspective, taxpayers, in the end, how much is it gonna cost us per household to do this project? What is the monthly that we're looking at just for this project? And when I looked at $16 a month, I'm like, that's a no-brainer. But when we don't know, we get scared. And that's where I think that over the last couple of years we've been at is scared. And what I would like to see instead of just this kind of report is an impact report on the community, which I think can be easily achieved. I did it while the actual meeting was occurring by throwing in his own numbers into ChatGPT. And I'm just requesting as a community member that maybe to help calm the community, that kind of information is provided to us. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm assuming we don't have any other comments from the board? No, all right. Let's move on to comments and announcements, general manager comments,
I have
nothing, governing board member comments.
On the back of big trucks, you may see a sign that says, if you can't see my mirrors, I can't see you. It's a warning to people that there are consequences of following too close. And recently, numbers came down from the state saying that they want to build a chain of windmills off the coast. Costs to exceed hundreds of billions, but for now, they don't know the real number. There's also been talk about the two tunnels they want to create under the Sacramento Delta at a cost of currently 20 billion. The high-speed rail for Las Vegas to Rancho went from 8 billion to 16 billion. Most recently, the cost is being quoted as 21 plus. The infamous high-speed from LA to San Francisco originally was a total cost of 33 billion. Now just this section that they figure they can finally get done will be 35 billion all by itself. Total cost will exceed 100 billion beyond what they originally budgeted. So I would caution to definitely check your mirrors to see what's happening.
Great, thank you. All right, and I just want to thank Matt for being here tonight and presenting us a lot of interesting information. All right, so I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 7:11. 7:11.